Hello, chemists. This is Miss Parvey, and we are going to learn about formulas for ionic compounds. So our guiding question: how do cations and anions bond to form neutral compounds? And our goal for this lesson is for you to write formulas for ionic compounds. What is a chemical formula? Well, it's those letters that show which atoms are bonded together. You can see up here NaCl is a chemical formula, NaF, CaO, and K2O. Those are all different types of chemical formulas. A chemical formula shows the lowest ratio or the smallest number of atoms needed to make all the atoms in the molecule stable. It's important to know that pairs of atoms sometimes, but do not always, bond in a 1-to-1 ratio. Up here we see NaCl bonded in a 1-to-1 ratio. There's one sodium and one chlorine atom that are bonded. But down here we see that there are two potassium atoms bonded with one oxygen atom. So sometimes they bond in a 1-to-1 ratio, but not always. Atoms, though, will bond, which gives them all stable octets, as seen by the dot diagrams, and which makes the compound neutral. All the positive and negative charges will add up to 0. So how do we figure out chemical formulas? If calcium and oxygen are going to bond, how many of each element are needed to make those atoms stable? We're going to use our periodic table today that you practiced in our last lesson with Ms. Zilski. On this periodic table, we see the charges that our atoms make at the top of each of the columns. And remember, we can do our little chant to help us, where we go +1, +2, +3, share, -3, -2, -1, stable, right? Our noble gases don't form ions. They don't bond with other elements. Okay, so we're going to follow 3 basic steps for writing formulas for compounds. The first step is that we're going to write the symbol and the charge for the metal and the non-metal ions. And we're going to use that periodic table that you just saw in order to get that charge. The second step is to check those charges. Do they add up to 0? If so, that compound is easy. It's just a 1-to-1 ratio. One atom of each element is needed to make all of those atoms stable. So in that case, we'll write the symbols with no subscripts and be done. But that is not always the case. If the 2 charges don't add up to 0, then we need to go to step 3. Step 3 is where we have to actually figure out that lowest ratio. This ratio is the lowest number of each ion you need to make the charges add up to 0. And there are 2 ways to do this. Our first, there's 2 methods, the list and count method, as well as the crisscross method. And we'll get into those as we go through an example later. So let's start with our first example, calcium oxide. How do we figure out how to write the chemical formula? Well, let's start with step 1. We need to write the symbol and the charge for the metal and the non-metal. And we're going to use our periodic table. Okay, so first we're going to we'll write our symbols. Ca for calcium, O for oxygen or oxide. We find Ca on our periodic table, and when I go up, I see that it has a +2 charge. So I'm going to put that over here by the Ca. I'm going to put a 2+ charge. Now I need to find oxygen on the periodic table. It's right here, and when I go up, I see it has a -2 charge. So I'm going to write that as a superscript up here, a 2-. So I see that calcium, when it makes an ion, it gives away electrons and it has a positive charge, where oxygen will gain electrons and it becomes negative. So we're done with step 1. Step 2, now we need to check and see if the two charges add up to 0. So I do that, +2 and -2, they equal 0. Now I know it's a 1-to-1 ratio. We can write the symbols with no subscripts. We are done. So I'm going to bring my Ca down, my O down. The formula for this is CaO. 1 atom of calcium bonds to 1 atom of oxygen. And we do not need a 1 for a subscript. Whenever it's just 1, we leave it blank.